Hello. Kelly's Taboo Terrors presents Visceral Pleasure and Extreme Cinema 3. I love bringing folks together to discuss my favorite genre of film, and that's extreme cinema. And as you can tell, this has become an annual event over here at Spinsters of Horror. So if you'd like to get involved, please email us. And it's horrorspinsters@gmail.com. I'm Kelly from the Spinsters of Horror, and my co host Jessica and I have a monthly show called I Spit on Your Podcast. And that's where we discuss horror, cult, and subversive cinema. I also co-host a Gorecast on disturbing films with the Queen of Extreme, Zoba with a Shotgun, and that is called Our Bloody Obsession. A few years ago, I created Taboo Terrors because I found myself drifting kind of more towards the more dark, disturbing, transgressive films. I just found that conventional horror just wasn't exciting me that much anymore. So once I dove headfirst into the abyss of the extreme, I've never looked back. So content and trigger warnings, folks. If you know anything about Kelly's Taboo Terrors, then I hope that you know what you're getting into. But if not, I want to remind all of you folks that there will be discussions on various themes and films that might be upsetting to some viewers, might be too disturbing, such as sexual assault, violence, torture, cannibalism, and more. So viewers' dismemberment is strongly advised. So this is the fourth panel of the weekend, the fourth and final panel, and this is on extreme cinema. So there are just some movies that strike a chord with you. They're either emotionally distressing, visually disturbing, or just plain batshit wild. These movies deserve a full discussion all on their own. And for this panel, we are trekking through lots and lots and lots of blood with the Taiwanese splatterfest, The Sadness from 2022. So I'm going to introduce my esteemed panel of guests, starting with Amber. So Amber is an Asian horror obsessive. The bloodier and the bleaker, the better. She's an UK correspondent for Fangoria with bylines at Arrow, Ghouls Magazine, and Grimoire of Horror. Amber is also about to launch Hungry Ghost Film Club, a screening club based in the north of England dedicated to East and Southeast Asian horror and genre cinema. Hello, Amber. Thank you. Also, welcome back, because you were a panelist last year, kind of.
I was, but I didn't stay very long because I had crappy internet, and I was very pissed off about it because we were talking about guinea pig. But yes, I'm so happy to be back with you today, Kelly. Thank you so much for having me back. With a much better internet connection, and I cannot wait to get into this film. It's one of my favorites for the last few years, and so glad you picked it.
Excellent. Thank you. Our next guest is Kelly McNeely, or I like to call her the other Kelly. So Kelly is a tea drinking, craft making, machete wielding screen junkie. She co-hosts the Murmurs from the Morgue podcast, the Dungeon of Deadly Delights YouTube channel, and Black Fawn Distros Takeover Tuesday, along with its 90s Night and Hot Stove from Hell episodes, or epi shows, as you've called them. I love that. She has appeared on the List TV with various podcast guest spots, including Eye on Horror, Haven't Seen It, Our Bloody Obsession, and I Spit on Your Podcast. She's a senior writer at ihorror.com and runs The Creepy Crafter on Facebook, where she creates signature horror cocktails to drunkenly prepare and consume on camera for your amusement. Hello, Kelly. How are you?
Hello, Kelly. I'm good. How are you?
I'm all right.
Excellent.
Tired, but we're here. We're going to kill it today.
I'm so excited to be back. Thank you so much for having me. I get like what Amber said, this is such a fantastic film, and I'm so excited to talk about it because, oh my God, this movie.
Excellent. And last but definitely not least is Marissa. So Marissa is a producer and co-host for Jersey Ghouls podcast, which is a part of the Geekscape network. On Jersey Ghouls, Marissa explores horror films and culture through a feminist academic lens. Marissa has also written articles for various outlets, including Ghouls Magazine and Horror Geek Life. She lives in New Jersey with her family. Hello.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for having me. I'm so excited to, endure this film yet again.
Thank you. And again, I am your host, Kelly from the Spinsters of Horror. All right. I'm also very excited to talk about this movie that blew me away when it became available to us in Canada last year. And so, yes, I definitely had to choose it to be, super relevant. We can't always talk about movies from the 80s. So, yes. So folks that are watching, we're gonna do like a 45-minute kind of discussion. We're gonna save all audience questions to the end. So folks, keep those questions for our panelists until then. So let's get into it. So my kind of like first question, comment, discussion kind of subject is, I found when I was like looking up horror for 2022 and trailers and stuff, that 2022 was really a big year for manifestations of trauma, let's say. There was just like a lot of that type of film I've noticed the last few years. Overall, I've noticed a kind of a reduced amount of sex and violence in horror in the like the last maybe 5 to 10 years, definitely the last 5 years. And then this comes along and absolutely blows me away. So, transgressive cinema is why I'm here. This is why I created Taboo Terrors. So I really found the sadness was making horror dangerous again, and I was all here for it. So let's talk about that. Amber, why don't you kick us off?
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you, Kelly. The last few years were kind of frustrating to me because I was getting quite bored. And I'm an A24 hoe, okay? Like, I love a bit of trauma horror. I love a slow burn folk horror, but even I was getting tired. And I don't like the whole requel, prequel, slasher whole thing. I'm not going to name any films because I don't want to start any fights, but I was getting a little bit tired of things. And people kept promising me, oh, this one's really gory and this one's really brutal. And it just wasn't. And I was getting to that point where I was like, is there anything out there that's going to make me feel again? And then out came the sadness. And I just loved it because I feel like a lot of modern horror films are kind of scared of their own audience and maybe scared of depicting certain things in case they get backlash or they get cancelled or whatever. And the sadness just didn't give a fuck about any of that. And it kind of reminded me of like the glory days of like the 80s splatter films, and especially reminded me a lot of like Hong Kong Category 3 movies where it just goes balls to the wall bonkers. And I like that. I like a film that kind of respects me enough as an adult to make my own choices about where my boundaries lie and what I can and can't handle. And it turns out I can handle this.
Excellent. Kelly.
Yeah,
Dangerous cinema.
Dangerous cinema. I absolutely agree. I think that there's been, horror is such a delightful genre because it does allow for so much variety in both tone and content. There's subgenres that are absolutely bountiful, and horror can be many things. One of the reasons that I feel like we turn to it so often is that sense of danger. It's electric and it's exciting and it's cathartic as well. So I feel like this is a movie that pushed a lot of boundaries, both with the whole making of the film, and this is not something that really comes from Taiwanese cinema very often, and it's something that really kind of shocked a lot of audiences because it came at a time where, like you said, there's been a lot of slow burns, a lot of very broody, moody horror, which I also absolutely love, but this is very bombastic and huge and bloody and brutal and just so over the top. The scene that always comes to mind is a subway scene where there's that geyser of blood, and immediately you're like, little nod of the hat from the director there, which is so awesome. And it really kind of knows its audience, knows what you want to see, knows what you're allowed to see, and really kind of plays with that, I think.
Yeah. Marissa, what was your first experience with it? Initial, did you have a visceral reaction to it? What are your thoughts on this very big but relatively mainstream movie?
Yeah, I mean, listen, I'm someone who admittedly only dabbles and wades into the very shallow end or baby pool of extreme horror, so don't kick me off. But so for me, a movie like this was a challenge, and I have to admit that in extreme horror, I need that meat on the bones. I need that substance. I need that almost sprinkle of A24, where there's a lot of things that I can unpack. There's a lot of themes I can play off of. So this film delivers in that way. It makes it worth it for me. And also, anytime that something can be so extreme yet make me giggle, I'm here for it. I think there's a lot of tonal fun to be had with this film in a weird way. So I was really into a lot of what it did. However, with that being said, I don't know that I'm like, hey, it's a Friday night, I'm gonna pop on the sadness. So I'm curious to kind of unpack that with you guys and see how that happens.
I definitely sit down and be like, I think I'm gonna rewatch The Sadness for the fourth time. I love it very, very much. Again, it was one of those where I was like, I need to buy this movie, and I don't say that very often, but absolutely. And Raven Banner here is a Canadian distributor, so yay that we actually got physical media distribution by a Canadian company. So I was also really happy on that, and the marketing and branding is so good, right?
So good, so good, so on point. So like some of the merch that I haven't managed to get any great ones because the best ones are in Hong Kong and I can't afford the shipping. But yeah, there are some absolutely rad shirts out there. So cool.
Wasn't there like a kimono or something very beautiful that came out?
Oh, yes. Yeah. And it had Cat's face on the back of it, and it had like the cat, like the kanji characters on it, and it looked so good.
Yes. Yeah.
Beautiful.
Yeah. They know what they're doing.
They know what the people want.
Exactly. We want kimonos, but like cheaper or something.
And bloodier at the same time. Yeah.
Yes. So I mentioned the word mainstream. So I don't know if it was Zoe or myself or both of us at the Thai that coined a term mainstream extreme. So this movie definitely for me comes into that realm of that like kind of my made up subgenre of films that are disturbing enough, but they don't go to the place where, well, they probably could, but then they don't, right? They kind of tread the lines of still being relatively accessible to a regular horror mainstream audience. But they tread the lines like very carefully. And I really think that The Sadness does this. I still would consider it an extreme horror movie, but it's a really great mainstream extreme that I would throw in like the Poughkeepsie Tapes or Megan is Missing or Soft and Quiet, like movies that could go even further, but they don't, to maintain accessibility. And so mainstream extreme, how do you folks feel about that? Amber, I'll go to you.
Yeah, I'm with you there. I think if we're thinking about that infamous iceberg that we all know and love, like The Sadness would probably be like on the second or third layer, I guess. I think it's a really good like introduction to extreme, or for people who are looking to get into extreme horror.
Yeah.
Excuse me. Because it's like polished enough stylistically and cinematically that it's actually enjoyable to watch, not like something like, I don't know, like August Underground. No offense to August Underground. We love August Underground. Yeah. But it's a hard watch visually because it's so grainy and it's, it's difficult. Something like Slaughtered Vomit Dolls as well, which we're not even going to get into. But it looks gorgeous. It looks really good. So I think the gore is like cartoonish enough and fantastical enough that it's like thrilling rather than realistically upsetting, even though I know that the depictions of certain events and sexual assault are quite difficult for people to get past. The violence itself, I think, is bonkers enough that you can have a great time with it.
It's a great point, and I think that's where when we go towards like the splatter aspect, splatter has that kind of like bombastic Tokyo Gore Police, like it's kind of comedic gore in a sense. Marissa, what do you think?
Yeah, I totally agree. I think if it wasn't, it didn't have a tinge of mainstream, I probably wouldn't be here. Because again, I'm very much with my floaties in the shallow end here. So for me, it's like there has to be that kind of relief to it. There has to be the sense of we're going to push there, but we're not going to go over the edge. And The Sadness is smart in that way. I think this film has a potential to be a mainstream horror film, while I think it is extreme by definition. And listen, I'm not going to lie and say it was easy for me to get through. And I know for this crowd, it's like it's, ridiculous to think this was hard to get through. But I think that there has to be a reward or a payout for me with extreme beyond just the extreme. And I don't know if that makes sense or is even fair to say, but for me, especially being from the States and having gone through everything we've all been through in the world in the past, 6 years or so, the payoff is the release of all of that anger and all of that, frustration. And so the splatter to me felt like that catharsis in a weird way. So the over the top gore is kind of what helped me get through it in a way. I think it's really important to say that it kind of lightens it, makes it more palatable. So I'm with you on that.
Yeah, it's hard to say that it's weird to say that it kind of softens it in a way with it being so over the top gory, but it does kind of soften it in a way because it makes it a little bit more fantastical, I think. Like Terrifier 2 also does that, where it's like it's so over the top and so absurd that you're like, I'm not as horrifically affected as I thought it would be because this is just like a little bit of a step back from reality. I think that horror goes through phases to reflect what's going on socially and culturally. Like Kelly and I've talked about this ad nauseum. But modern horror feels a little darker, a little more dangerous, a little bit more depressing. And it's not really surprising why. Like you said, everything we've been going on in the last 6 years or so. And you look at the average audience for horror movies nowadays, it's, millennials and Gen X that grew up with like the 90s teen horror cycle and the 2000s remake wave. And we're all pretty cranky and depressed adults now. So we want our horror to reflect that, I think. So again, with films like Soft and Quiet and Terrifier 2 and even Speak No Evil, that are kind of buzzing in those online circles, you're seeing a lot about those movies online. There's a bit of a turn back to those films that make us feel like we're in danger. And I think that's really fantastic because it's a response to that kind of nihilistic reaction to societal changes over the past few years. But we just want to feel something, and that something is dark. And I love that this film had something like almost like 99% practical effects as well. Like it's so practical and so bloody, and they went so over the top with just making sure there would never run out of blood. That was the one thing that the director said to the Zemeckis teams. It's like, I don't care what you do, just never run out of blood. I'm going to be so mad if you run out of blood, and they never did. So I think that it kind of was a great way to approach that. And even with the subway scene that we kind of talked about or alluded to a little bit earlier, that is kind of inspired, or seems like it's inspired by, there was a 2014 mass murder that also occurred on the train in the Taipei Mass Rapid Transit. I think he said something like, the attacker said that he wanted to do something shocking and big, and he had been thinking about it for a while. And like his record was, I think, 4 people that he killed on the train. And so I think it was kind of nifty that like there's the line that the attacker in the subway says, like, "Did I break the record after he stabbed 5 people?" So again, like there's something that's dangerous and dark and real about it, but because it is so over the top and so explosive that it feels somewhat safe while you're also feeling like you're at a little bit of danger at the same time.
So that's something that I think I've been wrestling with for literally since I agreed to be on this panel, is that whole thing that you referenced about we need to feel something. And the question that I think I'm left wondering, and why I can't decide how I feel about this film, is what am I supposed to feel, or how? I mean, listen, I'm assuming extreme horror is never supposed to make me feel good, right? This isn't a Disney film, but I get that. I'm slowly starting to separate that in my head. But I think at the end of the day, what's stuck in my claw, if you will, is I don't know how the fuck to feel, because I'm not sure what this filmmaker wants me to feel, and I don't know that I love the message he's trying to get across. So I guess my question to all of you is, what is it that we are supposed to be feeling?
I think for me, like what I feel is, it's kind of like when I watch I Saw the Devil, which is like my favorite movie of all time, that you watch it and you're like, oh, I'm sad now. Like I feel like this feels like heavy. Like I feel this weight on me. And in a time, like I was saying, we're all kind of very nihilistic and kind of depressed a lot of the time. I think it kind of almost is like a little bit of a cathartic feeling to that too, of like that acknowledgement that like you're allowed to feel shitty, and you're allowed to feel dark, and you're allowed to feel things are terrible, and like also things could be a lot worse. So there's that, I guess.
So true.
I'm going to expand on that, Kelly, and say, yes, you are allowed to feel bad and shitty, but I also think what the sadness is telling you is that you're allowed to enjoy feeling violent. And, obviously not to the extent that these infected people go to, but something this film makes very clear is that sex and violence go hand in hand, and that there is this cathartic need sometimes to just enjoy violence and like have a great time with it. And the film gives you this safe space to express and explore cases of blood and horrific things that you would never dream of doing in real life. But because the film's showing you that this is a safe place to have fun with it, you can. And I think, again, going back to that point of sanitized horror, is a lot of filmmakers are scared to show that because they don't want the audience to think, oh, well, I don't enjoy violence. Well, it's okay if you do. Like, it's okay if you enjoy violence in films. So many of us do. And I think we've kind of lost that fun that comes with brutality. So I think the sadness kind of points a finger at the audience as like, you're getting off on this and you kind of like it. And that's okay because it's fun.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that what the director said as well is that like it's about people that, you know, that don't have lives that they feel happy with. They feel kind of disconnected and they don't have meaningful relationships and they're not happy with their lives and their jobs and their decisions, and they don't really know how to get any escape or release from that. And then this virus comes in that just kind of makes everything okay. It's okay to feel those things. It's okay to kind of have this purpose of exploring that anger, of exploring that sadness, of exploring that vicious side of it. And that purpose that they kind of feel is entirely connected to that pent up frustration and anger, which is a kind of an interesting point in terms of like, you know, a lot of zombie horror films, if we're kind of approaching it as a zombie film, are less about, or they're more about becoming shitty to survive and like the things that humans do and like the way we become shitty to kind of have those survival instincts. Whereas I feel like the sadness is less about becoming shitty to survive and more about embracing the shittiness within, maybe. And just allowing that to kind of be something that you can let out and say, like you said, Amber, that like, yes, I feel these things and I can be okay with feeling these things sometimes.
Right. And
Yeah.
not only that, but it's like completely natural and
Mhm.
human. You know, how if COVID shows us anything, it's that our society as a humanity is only a few steps away from breaking down into total chaos. And that's
Absolutely.
you know, part of that is just comes from being a human. So not only is it fine to explore those feelings, it's also natural to be afraid
Mhm.
sometimes.
No, that's fair. It's funny because I just keep thinking as you guys are speaking to this, and everything you're saying is so true. Even if I don't want to palate it, I don't want to swallow it. I need to take my medicine. I get that, but the tear. What I keep calling back to is the tear that drops from everybody's eye before they
Mhm.
fully turn,
Mhm.
right? And to
Right.
me, that's the full loss of our humanity. Like the line
Mhm.
that I keep calling back to is when he accuses us all of being like, you're gonna love being violent and depraved. And yes, maybe we are all gonna love it. Let's be honest, we're a hop, skip, and a handmaid's cloak away from complete social unrest, right? At least here in the States. I literally live in constant fear of the idea of having to be violent to survive, like you said. So it's like, yes, there is a release, there is a joy to be had in letting it be in such a safe place, but I just don't know that I'm ready to accept the premise that I am just a hop, skip, and a teardrop away from shedding all of my good in humanity.
Mm.
And that's, I mean, maybe that's why I cling so hard onto like just not wanting to, you know, I don't know. Does that make sense? I don't
100% that makes sense. And I feel like that's not a bad way to be either, to like hold on to that humanity and hold on to that,
good
like
way to
it's a very good way to be, to not like have that like hairpin trigger of just going out
But we all
and
do,
attacking
though,
everyone.
right? I mean, Jesus, as much as I hated like soft and quiet, it taught me that I will fucking rage when I have
Yeah.
to against people like that. But and we're gonna have to, right? So
Right.
so maybe this is just showing me the truth I don't want to admit about myself, which is that I will become just gore-tastic when need be.
You will cut a
Join
bitch. Just straight up cut a
nihilism.
bitch. Yeah.
Yeah, I will, especially to protect whatever we have left to protect in the States. But yeah, I don't know. I think it's a really profound statement, this film.
Mhm.
So you guys are right. I just need to own
Hashtag stay sad.
it. Oh, we are.
Yep.
This has been amazing. Thank you so much for your really interesting insights. I can't wait to rewatch this and love it even more. Let's move on to the next aspect of the sadness, which is it was a movie created during our COVID-19 pandemic that is still happening. So this movie being as much as Rob Jabaz likes to pretend, and he likes to say often that he's like, there's nothing, I didn't have anything political in mind or anything, but there's a lot to be said in this movie of commentary on the COVID-19 crisis, right? We see in this movie a social and societal collapse in the face of this lethal pathogen, which is bringing out the worst in people, furthering like othering marginalized communities. It talks about politicizing the pandemic, the scare tactics of the medical community, and there's even mentions of it all being a hoax in the sadness. So what are your thoughts of the sadness being kind of essentially a commentary on our current pandemic we're living in? Kelly, why don't I jump over to you?
Sure. So I think that this film is the fact that it kind of is set and takes place in Taiwan is kind of interesting because like Taiwan, and this speaking as a woman from Canada that knows very little about how everything really works in the world, but from what I understand, they actually have a pretty decent relationship in terms of like their relationship with the government. Like Taiwan has taken really innovative measures to address disinformation and to kind of expose and like introduce to people like how government policies work and how they make those changes. And like there's a circle of trust and transparency that was built that kind of like possibly helped to contribute to compliance with COVID-19 protocols. So in terms of like having this set in Taiwan, Rob Jabaz has said like he wanted to create a Taiwan that was different, that had a mistrust of the government, that really does kind of reflect a lot of other countries and what we've been seeing there. So what? So there's that line that, no one trusts doctors anymore, which I think is a very poignant line that's included in the script. And I know that this was a film that was kind of started when producers approached him and said like, hey, no one's making movies right now for what I feel are obvious reasons. So let's make a movie while no one else is doing it. And let's have it be about a pandemic because I feel like that's something to be very like appropriate to do. And so he kind of made it about the pandemic. And having that element of like that direct reflection on things that were happening in different spots around the world and things that were happening with different relationships with people socially and culturally, I think is very appropriate given how poorly a lot of places reacted to COVID. That said, it's also a very interesting way that he approaches the idea of the pandemic. Of it's kind of been talked about broadly as a zombie film, but it's kind of not exactly that at the same time. I kind of have a huge place in my heart for zombie films that aren't zombie films. The ones that are like, it's a virus, it's different. There's something about me that kind of like loves that, like, sure, okay, I'll go with it. Absolutely, why not? So yeah, it's about that frustration. It's about the rage. It's about everything that people were feeling at that time. And again, allowing it to be okay to kind of express and to lean into those feelings, I think.
Amber.
Yes, 100%, Kelly. I very much agree with the Taiwan setting, especially, is really interesting. During COVID, I was living in South Korea, which of course is a vastly different country to Taiwan, but they are both in Asia, and there are certain similar cultural norms and social things that I could see reflected in both things. Kind of how can I describe it? Less of a self-obsessed focus than we kind of have in the West, and more of a collective community type of thing. In Korea, nobody thought twice about wearing masks. We were all wearing them all the time. There was never like any weird conspiracy theories or things like that. So it was interesting for me to see that Taiwan, that kind of Jabaz's take on it from that point of view. I think in general, the sadness is one of the more interesting takes on the pandemic, because I have to be honest, I was already getting tired of seeing films try and do it, because we already lived in it. It was hell. Like, give us a few years of space. But so many people in society showed their true colors during the pandemic. This self-obsession, this disregard for other people's safety, actively putting other people at risk, immunocompromised people, this refusal to wear a mask. And I think this bloodthirstiness of the sadness kind of reflected this. People didn't give a shit. This virus was spreading and it was horrible and violent. And did anyone really care? Everyone was so obsessed with themselves that they forgot to care about their fellow man. And like we were talking about before, I think it really highlights how fragile humanity is. We like to think of ourselves as really civilized, and one of the we always compare ourselves to animals, where animals don't pay to live on Earth, and animals don't have wars, and animals don't like freak out and kill each other all the time. Yeah. So I really think this film highlights that we're only ever a few steps away from breaking down into like complete chaos, and COVID was really one of the times in our lives, definitely, where I think we've all seen that. We know that happens, and it probably might happen again.
Thank you, Marissa.
Yeah, Amber, I totally agree with you. I kind of was like, I'm over the virus as a trope at this moment, unfortunately. And I say that as the biggest zombie fan I know, but I think it was a little on the nose. Rob, stop. Dude, you saying this has nothing to do with politics and that you have no intention is like A24 saying they have no feminist agenda. Like, stop, respectfully, dude. I call BS. I think there was, see, that's what another thing that I find myself circling back to is you can't make this film and say you don't have a political agenda. I think you have to own that you are calling out the people, the deniers, calling out the anti-vaxxers, and you know what? And again, respectfully to your audience, fuck anybody who doesn't believe it, right? It's not mythical. So to me, I get that he didn't mean to, but you don't get to dabble in the politics of the moment and then go, oops, I did. Like Rosemary's Baby wasn't about women. Like, no, own it, man, own it. And own the fact that you don't know what you're saying. We're all sitting here gleaning more out of this than he probably even intended, which is beautiful and lovely and what I love about what we all do. But it's also frustrating to me because it's like, I want to be Team Cat. I want to be the one who carries the girl through the subway, even though it is fucking death to me. Because one of the things that scared me the most, and the circle of trust just between us girls, right, is in the moment where she's carrying her through the subway.
Tunnel, yeah. Mm-hmm.
I had a moment where I was like, shit, you need to fucking drop her and go. You are going to get yourself killed. And that moment is why extreme horror is probably not for me, because I lost sleep over the fact that I would have left another human being to save my own ass from the businessmen who will haunt my nightmares. Okay. And I when faced with that moment, and I got to give a shout out to Fright School here because they are the most beautiful, amazing podcast in the universe. Fright School said, we are just a thin veneer of civility. Right. And so I think that's what scares me the most, and that's to me what this comment on the pandemic is. We lost that thin veneer, and I don't know that we've gotten it back, and so here we are in the sadness. Mm-hmm. There they are. See,
yeah, I don't think you can claim like political apathy either, and then blow up your president's head in the movie.
Yeah,
yes,
it's like, yeah, all right.
And I'm not saying in America we don't want to blow up. You know what I mean? Listen,
we've all been there.
2020, we've all been there.
So y'all kind of brought up this idea of zombies, viruses. So is The Sadness a zombie horror movie? Like, are you folks a stickler for the debate that the undead are the true actual zombies versus our like infected zombies? There's that kind of debate, right? So are you all like a stickler in that debate? Do you have one side or the other? Can infected people be considered zombies? What are your thoughts? Let's start over with Kelly.
Yeah, so to me, zombies is like, there's something about a zombie film that is sometimes lost in the production of a zombie film, was that like you think about the fact that it's a revived dead body. Like, the smell is going to be terrible. There's going to be decomposition. It's disgusting. And there's something about that makes it so like much grosser, I think. And the thing about The Sadness that kind of separates it from a zombie film for me is that it's that element of malice. He was greatly inspired by Garth Ennis's Cross, which is a fantastic, like the first book is, it's so freaking good. But is also inspired by The Screwfly Solution by Raccoona Sheldon, which again, it's that element of malice. You know, it's if you're getting attacked by like a wild animal and it like rips your eye out and you're like, oh shit, like you're going to be obviously traumatized for life, but you're not going to hold it against the animal. It's doing what it's going to do. But if a person rips your eye out, you're going to have a much more different response to that down the road. Like, that's going to stay with you a lot longer because it's that intention and it's the terribleness of it. You know, it's got more agency and personality, and the virus kind of makes you become the worst version of yourself while you're still able to express yourself. Like, they talk, they have conversations, they kind of say things that are really, really creepy and unnerving. Like, is the line, he's like, I was almost got off or something like that. I can't remember the baseball.
I shot my load.
Oh, shot my load. I love that. But because of the dialogue pre-infection as well, you get a lot of insights into their characters and their motivations, like the businessman, for example. Side note with the businessman, like, I think they shot the eyeball scene, like the hospital eyeball scene, in basically one take with no rehearsal, because they wanted it to kind of be like that real visceral danger to it of not going in prepared. And the actor that played the businessman, his name is Zhu Shengwang. He really kind of had a difficult time getting rid of this character because it kind of stuck with him so much. And that's part of the sadness that kind of makes it not a zombie movie for me. I think the fact that you can have this character that really lingers and holds on to you and has that element of, like, again, we were all said, like, he's terrifying. We do not want to encounter him on a subway in any way, shape, or form ever. Like, no. And the fact that you would not get that from a zombie movie is kind of what makes it a little bit different for me, I think. It's that malice. And I know he also kind of cited Pee-wee's Big Adventure as a source of inspiration for it as well. How it's like just the plot structure and that he's like moving through like all these different areas, like encountering all these different often unrelated events. And like, that's just kind of how the structure of the film works, which is really funny when you think about it in that light. But yeah, it's there's something about the malice and the intent and the character of it that puts it on a different tier for me.
Excellent.
I agree.
Amber? Yeah.
I don't think it's a zombie film. I think it's an infected film. And the film it reminds me the most of is 28 Days Later. And of course, in 28 Days Later, there's that infamous line at the beginning where the scientist is like, they're infected with rage.
The rage virus. Yeah.
Yes. And then later, there's another great scene in 28 Days Later in the army barracks with, I can never remember the actor's name, not Cillian Murphy, the soldier man. But he says something like, what did we see before the infection? I'll tell you what I saw. I saw people killing people. And that's what I see now is people killing people. Nothing changes. You know, it's just that culturally and the circumstances have changed. And I think that's the same with the sadness. You know, these things, whatever they are, they're people. And that's a lot more frightening than zombies because they're just an encapsulation of the evil that humans are more than capable of, you know, with or without being undead. Everything in this film could happen. I mean, maybe, I don't know how the jugular works, but maybe it doesn't go that far. But, you know, everything else physically could happen. There's nothing supernatural. There's nothing like crazily outlandish. These are just people killing and raping people. And that is what people have done since the dawn of time. It's just in the sadness, there's something missing in their brain that takes away that shame and that social acceptance, which is terrifying to think. That to me, that's scarier than like a dead guy coming out of the ground.
Yeah, there's something about like the male sex drive and aggression being like so close together. It feels like there's just like a switch between the two of them. And I like they're so close together and all it takes is one little like, and I think that's part of what makes this film kind of so terrifying and it really sticks with you is because, again, that intent behind it and that fact that like this is just people, like it's just people with no inhibition whatsoever, and this is what they do.
Yeah. Marissa?
All right, hear me out. Go kick it back to Return of the Living Dead. The zombie corpse says it's the pain. It's the rot. It hurts to be dead, right? So in the classic zombie trope, it is a part of the brain that has been destroyed. In this film, the limbic system takes over the rest of the thinking cerebral cortex area. And again, it's been a while since my human anatomy classes gets killed off. To me, these films all are one and the same in that we lose that piece of what makes us human, whether it be life or, you know, living, or like you said, like that limbic, like that little line that takes away our humanity. So yes, my hot take is this is indeed a zombie film. And while I love my zombies yelling for more paramedics and being hilarious, I will accept that the sadness in my head, they have lost their humanity. They have lost the part that makes them alive in a weird way. And to me, they're zombies. That's my hot take, y'all.
I appreciate that.
Anything to get the Return of the Living Dead referenced. That's my fucking heart right there.
I appreciate that, like, the definition of zombie can be, like, again, like, it's not about the loss of life, it's about the loss of humanity.
Yeah.
I like that.
And I love 22. But you guys are right. They're rage virus films.
They're definitely raging. That's for sure. Okay, so we're rounding off everything. I saw that there are a couple of questions in the wings, but folks, if you're watching this, if you have questions for our panelists about the sadness, zombie horror, you know, whatever, please put them into the chat now as we're rounding off the discussion. So my final question is about, writer-director Rob Jabaz. Like, this was his debut film, which still blows my mind because I thought it was absolutely fantastic, stellar, like, again, stand out, like top 3 horror films of 2022. Own it, love it, recommend it. Almost a comfort film, whatever that says about me. Like, I love this movie. So does anybody know? Like, I haven't really heard anything or seen anything about where he's going next or what's on the plate, what's on the docket for Rob Jabaz. Like, what is he up to? I know, Amber, you said that you like chat with him a bit on Instagram. Like, do you have any insider scoop? Like, what's going on with Rob Jabaz, man?
If only. He might watch this and be like, this bitch doesn't know me at all. We have talked about it a little bit because I love this film and I'm really keen to know what he's going next. And I know that he is working on something, but that's about all I know. I don't know anything else about it. I wish I did. I know what I'd like to see him do.
Okay.
I would really like to see him, and I don't think they need remakes, and I don't necessarily want them to have remakes, but I would love to see him take on like I mentioned earlier, one of the category 3 Hong Kong classics, like Ebola Syndrome or like The Untold Story. I don't know. I just could see him working with Anthony Wong so well.
Oh my God.
And just this, like, Ebola Syndrome is already repulsive and terrifying, but I think he could, and again, it doesn't need a remake, but that's, something I could see him going. I would love to see him take on like a real life serial killer story or something where he can really go full dark, because I think he has that in him, and that's a compliment, Rob.
Yeah, absolutely it is. I am absolutely fascinated with him, and you listen to him talk again. He's just like a regular dude, bro. Like, he's just like, he chats and you're like, oh, okay. I mean, I adore him, and I usually don't like men like him, but I adore him, and I'm just like fascinated by his brain, and again, fascinated by this movie. So Kelly, what are your thoughts?
I know that the cartoon that plays like near the beginning of the film when the boyfriend's like going back to the apartment, that was an animated short from 2015 that Rob did himself. So I'd be kind of curious to see, like, I'm not saying I want to do an animated film. I'm saying I'm kind of curious to see like what effect stuff he would like to do more of, if there's kind of, I do love the idea of him doing like a dark serial killer, like kind of like oh my gosh, why can't I think of the name right now? A Maniac type style, like serial killer film. I would love to see something like that from him, or again, like The Untold Story or Ebola Syndrome, which I know is one of his favorite films. So I think that would be a great one for him to kind of take on too. But whatever he does next, I just want it to be just as dark and disturbing, because that's just, I think he does it so well. And I think we need more of that just brash confidence in horror. I think that it's very different. It's fun, and it allows you to have fun in a way that you don't feel fully comfortable that you're having fun with it, which I think is really effective. So yeah, I would love to see him do more of that. Just anything that kind of allows him to get his hands really dirty and explore the dark sides of human mentality and emotion and creativity. I would love to see.
He does do some really disturbing, going back to what you said about animation, he does do some really disturbing like 3D animations. For like, he does a lot of music videos for like metal bands. Kelly, they're probably right up your alley. I know you're a metalhead. They're much too heavy for me. But yeah, he does like a lot of really freakish, kind of like Where the Dead Go to Die style animation. So yeah, check out his Instagram.
It hasn't really like jumped out at me, but I'll have to go back and take a look. Marissa, what do you think?
Again, I've got a theory, you guys. I think that we're ready for a Canadian extreme. The French crawled so you can walk, y'all, or run, as it were. I think that he should definitely imbibe. No, I'm just kidding. I think he should imbibe Canadian extreme. I don't know what that looks like. You tell me. But I'm ready for Canadian extreme to be a whole thing. But more importantly, I really don't want him. Here's what I don't want. Since you guys have a direct line to him, you can put in a good word for me. I don't want the Splat Pack Part 2. All right. Post September 11th, we got a bunch of vapid, stupid. I'm not going to use torture porn because that term sucks, but a bunch of really extreme, mainstream extreme that didn't really say much or nothing that we wanted to hear. Eli Roth. Sorry, I had something in my throat. So my point there is, sorry, I know you guys like have to be more. I don't have to worry about it. My point is, if he's gonna keep doing this, he's gonna go down this road. He's gonna bring out the extreme. He's gonna make a statement like he did, whether he liked it or not. Then he better have something good to say. My only hope there is that keep being smart about your horror. We don't need more extreme for nothing. We need extreme for good reason. So that's my vote.
I'd love to
Or
see him
Canadian.
do like Canadian extreme horror with like Steven Kostanski doing effects or something like that. I feel like that would be like that is a movie I would love to see.
What
Absolutely.
a dream team.
I'm here for it.
Put that
That's
together.
a splat hack I could get behind.
Yeah.
I would
All
love
right.
that.
So I'm going to definitely got some audience questions. All right. So Jess, let's bring up a question here.
Oh, this is fun.
So it's from Jess. Do you think we are seeing a revival of gore and splatter with mainstream extreme films like The Sadness and Terrifier? Amber, I'll jump to you first.
I'd like to. I think yes. I mean, look at the commercial success of Terrifier 2, especially even like normies are morbidly curious about that kind of thing. And I think that's part of the reason it does so well. I think this is what bothers me. I think audiences like give us more credit. We can handle more than some filmmakers think we can. And I think we're seeing it now with like Marvel films bombing and something like Oppenheimer and Barbie doing really well. People are bored of the same shit. And I think it's the same with like gore films. I think people are going to get bored of these prequels, and I hate to say it, but the folk horrors too. And I think people are wanting that splatter to come back because we've had 3-4 years of like just being cooped up inside, and we are going crazy, and we want some blood and some everything. We want some viscera. So yeah, I think we're in a good time. I think we're in a good moment for it.
Yeah, I feel like the next kind of wave in horror is going to be some combination of or separation of like invasion horror because of, you know, what we've kind of been sitting inside for the last couple of years. And again, like that splatter horror with films like Terrifier 2 doing so well at the box office. I think some bigger studios are going to take a look at that film and go like, oh, they made that movie on such a small budget and it made so much freaking money. How can we do something like that? Because clearly people want that kind of movie. So I feel like we're probably going to see, I would love to see like a combination of those two things and have like a new French Extremity type of like them type of home invasion horror. But I think that we're going to see a lot more action. Because it also kind of, I mean, when you think about it, the 90s is coming back in fashion right now. We're going back into like the Y2K era of things. I don't want to say we're going to go back to a certain subgenre that we shall not be named type of thing. But I would not be surprised if we did see like kind of a resurgence of that type of action in horror, I think.
Right. Marissa, what do you think?
Yeah, 100%. It's where we're heading, for better or worse. Because I think the world is literally and metaphorically on fire. I think we are extreme is becoming the new mainstream because we unfortunately are in a moment in history where things feel so extreme. So I think it makes a lot of sense if you look at horror as our way of kind of processing the world around us.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Great question, Jess. Next. From Facebook user, do you think The Sadness gained as much notoriety as it did at the time because we were living through a pandemic at the time it was released?
It's a good question. I feel like it's a combination of word of mouth for this one did a lot of favors, I think. And I think it also helps that, again, it's something so different from what we were seeing. The festival circuit also, I think, did a lot of favors in terms of like just getting the word of mouth out there and getting people interested in seeing it. But I do think that a combination of like having this really visceral, like zombie pandemic movie that everyone was just hearing so much about because of how brutal and insane and bloody and ridiculous it is, I think that kind of pushed it into the forefront of what people were keeping an eye out for because it was so different and it was because something that we hadn't seen in a while. So I think it definitely had some element of influence, but I think there's a lot of sort of elements going on and into kind of what brought it into the forefront, perhaps.
Anybody else?
I think a part of it was that it had an inability to land on one side of the political spectrum in a weird way. Because when you look at the scene with the doctor or the scientist guy who is also absolutely bonkers, cuckoo, scary, and amoral, I think it did a good job of towing that line. And maybe that is the brilliance that Rob had in this, is that it didn't really say too much that would be offensive to one side or the other in a weird way. So I think that had a lot to do with it too.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember. So when it dropped on Shudder, that's where I saw it for the first time. Rue Morgue here in Canada did like a online like screening of it, more of like a watch party, and Rob Jabaz was there, and then we did a Q&A afterwards. We all watched it together. We're all just like, what the fuck? But afterwards, oh my God, where was I going with this? Damn it! All right, I'm gonna move on, and then I'll.
Rue Morgue?
Remember.
Watch party?
From that.
I'm so excited too. It's gone. It's gone. It's fine. I don't want to waste anybody's time. Okay. We're going to move on to the next question while I try to think about what I was going to say. Okay. Thank you all for your reviews and takes on the sadness. I also thank you. What would each of you say is most effective about the film?
The gore.
Yeah.
The gore is fantastic and all practical, and it looks great. For me, what's most effective about it, and I've spoken about this a few times, is that it doesn't mollycoddle me. It doesn't pander to its audience. I like offensive films, and I like films that challenge me, and I like films that don't necessarily care if someone keeps watching it or not. And I think it's very refreshing to have a filmmaker who's like, yeah, my film might offend you, and that's fine. You don't have to watch it. But if you want to be offended and you like pushing your boundaries, here you go. Here's a eyeball getting violated.
I think to jump off from that as well, one of the things that I found most effective was the brutality of it. Just like emotionally, psychologically, physically, it's like I said before, it has that element of it's just so sinister and so malicious and so not angry, because it's not an angry film. It's not things happening out of anger. It's happening because like there's just no inhibitions, and people are just like, this is just my most authentic self is going to be violating this eyeball today. And I think that is something that is really kind of fantastic about this film, is that it kind of it revels in that brutality. It revels in being, the most extreme zombie movie ever made. It revels in that element of just being like really, 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 really dark. And I love that, because again, I love to watch a movie and then afterwards be like, oh, what do I do now? There's nothing better to me than watching a movie and just feeling like despair and sadness and excitement at the end of it. So yeah.
Agreed.
And then you text me all about it, and it's great.
Yeah. Frantically,
yes. I just remembered what I was going to say. Thank you, Brain. So during this Q&A, kind of branching off what you were saying, Kelly, is that we know that he could have gone even further with this. There's a lot of the violence that is implied or off screen. It's often more, and I can say this objectively, it's often more like verbally offensive. There's a lot more really disgusting, vile things that are said over what is actually perpetrated by the people. Like you see a bloodied, messed up, stroller, but we don't actually see what happened to that baby. We don't need to see it. We get it. But a lot of that stuff is off screen or implied. And so, I love that Rob is so just like, he was very practical about it. He's like, I wanted to get this into festivals and make money, so I didn't take it. That's why it's mainstream extreme, right? He could have gone further to make it like extreme, but that was not going to be playing in festivals. He was not going to be making the money, essentially. You know what I mean? So I love how practical he was about it. And I feel like that was really smart, because I think it did do quite well. I mean, would it have done better if it came out when we actually had more like theaters open and theater goers? Like, that's an interesting question too, because when it was actually out, like, the theaters weren't, it was like more like truly like right in the middle of the pandemic. Whereas Terrifier 2, like people were more able to go out and patronize cinemas. So what do you guys think? Like, if this actually came out maybe now, would it have been as effective? Would it have been like another Terrifier 2 where it made a lot of money and people were really down for it because we were all actually able to go to the cinema and see it?
I don't think so. And this has nothing to do with the quality of the film, but I think because this is more about the audiences, it's not in English. And it's a
Fair.
foreign film, and
Yeah.
a lot of people who, like I said, the normies, God love them, they went to see Terrifier 2 out of morbid curiosity. I don't know if as many of them would go and see like a gory Taiwanese film, because a lot of people have issues with subtitles.
I agree. Yeah.
Right. That's a good point. I forgot it in subtitles because I have no problems with subtitles. Give me a foreign film with subtitles.
You just absorb the film. Yeah.
In a just world, it would have done great, but I don't think we're in a just world, and I think we're in a very xenophobic world that people don't want to hear other languages.
I agree with that. Absolutely. And Kelly, I also do agree with what you were saying earlier about it, like so much of the violence being implied and how that's so much more effective because your imagination can just go 5 steps ahead with it. So that is a very wise thing that he did there. Well, also making it something that we could see at Fantasia.
There you go. Exactly. Best of kind of both worlds. You know what I mean? Like if I want to see that, I can pop on my August Underground Blu-ray and I can see a lot of that stuff. But sometimes I don't want to see that and I want to watch this. So, all right, we're at the 5-minute mark of the end. Any final thoughts? Anything else you want to say about the sadness that you weren't able to say yet?
I just want to say shout out to, and I'm going to mispronounce his name, Zhu Changwang, because he's iconic and I want to see him in all horror films from now on. Like, what a horrible man.
Oh my gosh. I've never been more physically uncomfortable by someone just having a conversation on a subway. And then it just keeps going from there.
Haven't we fucking been there?
And I do really love that, like, even during that scene, like even when he's kind of pushing himself on Kat, she just kind of stands up for herself. She's like, fuck no, just I'm not moving because this is my seat. No, thank you. And when I was talking to Rob when I was doing my interview with him, he was saying that like one of the reasons he wanted to include that is because he has a couple sisters, and when he was doing the audition process for that scene, he would just have a girl be like, okay, so improvise, you're on the subway, some guy's bugging you, what do you do? And he said that like every other actress was like saying something about like, oh, I have a boyfriend. And he's like, no, don't say that, because that implies you're someone's property. You're not, you're yourself. And Regina Lee was I think the one girl that didn't say something about like, oh no, I have a boyfriend, stay away from me. She just kind of like stood up for herself and was like, no, fuck you, get out of here. And just like took no bullshit. And I really love that for her character, because I feel like we see so many wilting flowers in horror. And this is not a wilting flower character. Like she really fights for herself. She fights for all of her survival and everything she goes through. Like she has every right to be horrifically traumatized by the end of this film, and she's still like standing tall at the end of it. So kudos to her as well. Like I have to say, like that's a great character that I feel like she doesn't get enough appreciation just as a character too.
And a final girl too.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And that's, I mean, the one thing I did want to mention, besides the fact that she rocks as a character in the film, is that at the end of the day, she survives and she walks away, and she's arguably immune, right? To I know we don't spend a whole lot of time on plot or all like that kind of stuff with this film for good reason. It's really buries the lead, but I think it's something sweet. I think that's why at the end of the day, I will tolerate a film in this arena, is because it does have that ending where she survives, and she hopefully will be the answer, right? So in my head, it's all going to be fine. Like but that's one thing I did like, was that his ending did kind of give that glimmer of hope that I think we also desperately need at this moment.
But also, like, not to rain on that glimmer of hope, but I feel like, I don't know if
do it.
This would be another movie. Like, don't you like hear gunshots through the door when she goes upstairs?
It's ambiguous.
Ambiguous. But you hear a female scream, and it doesn't sound. I don't know. It's deliberately ambiguous. So Marissa, if you want to believe happy ending, I love that for you.
Let's please
over here crying in the corner.
Yeah, she was screaming because there were other people on the rooftop, and they shot the other people, and she got away. There you go.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right. In my Capra world, she's fine. Okay.
Oh, okay. Well, we're gonna wrap this up. This has been an amazing discussion, also super fun and entertaining, like this movie is disturbing and entertaining. So that's it, folks. Visceral Pleasure and Extreme Cinema 3 is over. This is the last panel. It's been an incredible weekend of extreme films and extreme discussion. So thank you to all of my incredible guests today and all weekend. Your insight and work continues to inspire me and everyone around you. I want to give another shout out to Jess, my tech gremlin, behind the scenes, being amazing, helping me, do all of this, because I don't do a lot of that tedious technical work. I host stuff. So that's it, folks. Like I said, I'm going to see you all next year for Visceral Pleasure and Extreme Cinema 4. But until then, stay grim.